I've been wanting to buy the Sony FX3 for a very long time now, but in this box is not the FX3, it's something that might actually change my mind. If you've been watching the channel, you know that I sold my Sony FX30. You can go check it out. I made a video on why I did that, but essentially I wanted to upgrade to the FX3. Everyone knows that the FX3 is one of the greatest cameras that Sony has ever made. The image quality is so good, and that camera is so close to perfection with little to no compromises, hence why so many people love that camera. At the time when I sold the FX30, I didn't actually pull the trigger on the FX3 because I wasn't in dire need for it, and I just told myself that I would wait until Sony released the FX3 Mark II. Now that was until this camera was released. If you remember last year, Nikon bought Red, the cinema camera company that makes really incredible cameras. Well, fast forward a year later and we have our first ever Nikon Red camera. This camera has a lot of really good things going for it. It's packed with a ton of amazing video features, and I'm not just testing out this camera because I want to test it out or it's just another camera review. I'm testing this out with the mindset that I really want to see if it checks all the boxes for me and if it's capable of replacing that FX3 that I've been wanting to get for the past 2-3 years now. Okay, first impressions, the camera is actually a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. For some weird reason, I had painted the picture that this was the same size as something like the Fujifilm X100. It's not that size, it's actually a little bit bigger, but it's still very, very thin and still very much pocketable. I know people were complaining that the camera doesn't have a grip, but it actually feels pretty solid in the hands. I'll know much more once I actually start shooting with it, but so far, again, first impressions, it doesn't feel that bad. This little cutout for the grip actually feels pretty comfortable. I don't have a massive hand, so it actually fits pretty nice. Also, this massive screen that I've never seen before on any other camera, it's a big 4-inch screen. Honestly, it looks like the size of like an iPhone or an iPod. Not quite as big, but it is huge, and it makes screens like the one on my A7 IV look like a toy. Has a few tally lights, isn't crowded with a ton of buttons, which is actually really nice. A little zoom rocker, obviously that big full frame sensor. The real reason why I have this camera is I'm going on a trip to Turkey, a country that I've never been before. The trip is in like a couple days, and every time I go on a trip, I like to see if I can bring something new. But the ZR was actually in my cart a couple weeks ago because I was so dead set on buying it for the price point that it is and everything that you get with it. But I wanted to be absolutely convinced. I wanted to really get my hands on it, take it on a trip, see how much I like it, see how it fits in with my Sony ecosystem, and then decide if this is a camera for me. So I am going to test out all those things that are important to me, like image quality. I'm going to compare codecs like the NRAW, the Red RAW, the ProRes, shooting in H.265 and see how that affects your footage. Even things like, is Red RAW manageable? Is it worth shooting in at that high bit rate? Also test out the heat, if this thing overheats. Something that worries me is that it doesn't have an internal fan like the FX3 does, which is actually one of the main selling points to why I like the FX3 and the FX30. This doesn't have it, which scares me a little bit, but some of my friends who have tested it out said it doesn't overheat, even in the desert. So we'll see when I test it out for myself. Also, how well does this integrate with my Sony ecosystem? I'm not going to be switching everything from Sony over to Nikon. This will literally just be a secondary camera if I buy it. So I'm curious to see how everything works together. They actually work together quite well compared to some other camera brands, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So you'll definitely see another video or two coming in the next few weeks talking about all of that. The reason why the FX3 made sense for me is because I was already in that Sony ecosystem. And so a lot of the Sony E-mount lenses that I like to use on the daily, I can just continue using them and I don't have to carry around extra lenses for an extra body. The FX3 is also just a perfect camera that really has no compromises. However, after seeing this, I definitely think that the FX3 Mark II should have a massive screen like this, but whatever. It also just has a lot of pro video features. Like, it has the internal fans. It has those quarter 20 mounting holes all around the camera. It has shutter angle. And it made sense for the way that I like to use a camera. I'm not buying this camera to fully rig it out and have a monitor and have a V-mount battery. Sure, it's great if you need all that, but I'm more of a run and gun type of person, especially when it comes to just filming content. So the FX3 being that smaller cinema camera with those pro video features and the quarter 20 holes, it meant that I didn't have to fully rig out that camera to get really amazing shots out of it. Okay, so Nikon sent me a ton of stuff. That way I'm ready for my trip. A lot of this stuff may not come with me because, again, I think I want that run and gun experience. I also just want to keep everything small and lightweight and compact. But it is nice to know that there's obviously cages that exist for this camera. This cage actually has a grip on it, which is helpful if you're someone that has a big hand or you just can't get used to this smaller grip. We have a Rosetta mount on here, and this is actually Nikon's remote grip that if you didn't want to use a cage grip, you can use this instead. And this actually has a ton of extra controls to use, which is nice. And this just mounts on to the Rosetta mount here, just like that. And if I wanted to rotate it, you just loosen it and you can rotate it down like that, or whichever feels nice. This is actually a really nice setup. We also have a top handle with it, so I can fully rig it out if I wanted to. I asked them if they can send me a 24-70 because this is obviously one of my most used lenses. And then I also wanted something to vlog on while I'm out there. Also just a wide angle for some landscape shots. And so I got the 17-28 f2.8. Okay, I wasn't going to get into specs this video, but I figure if you're someone who hasn't seen any Nikon ZR content, then, and this is your first one, you may want to know them. So Nikon ZR, in terms of specs, has a 24.5 megapixel full frame, partially stacked sensor. It's the same sensor that we saw in the Z6 III, and this is partially the reason why I think I'll like this camera, is because I really like the Z6 III. It has 5-axis image stabilization, or IBIS, up to 7.5 stops of correction. Has the same X-Speed 7 processor as the Z6 III. In terms of video, and I hope I get all this right because there's a lot going on here, but as far as I know, it can do 6K up to 60 frames per second in NRAW and Red Code RAW. In ProRes RAW, it can go up to 30 frames per second. In ProRes RAW, if you're shooting 6K, it only goes up to 30 frames per second. Once you bump it down to 4K, it goes up to 60 frames per second. However, in NRAW, Red Code RAW, you can go 6K up to 60 frames per second. Everything else, like 4K, goes up to 60 frames per second using the full frame oversampled sensor. If you are shooting 4K 120, it does have an APS-C crop attached to it. You can shoot full HD all the way through. I don't think anybody cares about that. In terms of bit depth, from what I understand, it's 10-bit H.265. If you're shooting ProRes 422, also 10-bit. ProRes RAW, 12-bit. And then NRAW and Red RAW are also 12-bit. This is also the first ever camera to have 32-bit float recording, so you never really have to worry about peaking your audio. It has dual base ISO when shooting in those log formats at 800 ISO and 6400 ISO. It also has shutter angle settings, so you don't have to worry about when changing your frame rate, also changing your shutter speed. Has that massive 4-inch touch LCD. It is a weather sealed body. It takes CF Express Type B cards as well as a micro SD card slot, which I'm not the biggest fan of the micro SD, but again, the way I'm going to be using this camera, I don't really care for that secondary slot. That being said, I don't want to sugarcoat it. The Nikon definitely has some issues that, depending on the type of person or user you are, you may not like. I made note of some of them here. One is the micro SD card slot. If you're someone taking this a little bit more professional, you are maybe a professional cinematographer or videographer, maybe you need a proper secondary slot, like being able to add a secondary type B card. It has that micro HDMI port, which I know a lot of people don't like. For me, I don't really care. I hate rigging out cameras, even though I have a ton of monitors and a ton of equipment. And especially with this big LCD screen, I don't think I'll ever need to add a monitor to this camera if I own this. The one downside is if I wanted to use my transmission systems, then yeah, I would have to hook them up using the micro HDMI port. But again, if you're going to be using monitors and you're going to be rigging out this camera, you're most likely going to be using a cage on it. And if you use this cage here, which I believe is from Small Rig, it has that locking safety cable holder, that way you don't damage your micro HDMI port. Again, it has no internal fans. Now, even though everyone said it doesn't overheat, I am a little bit skeptical, so I will be testing this myself. The file sizes are massive when you are shooting in those raw codecs. It's expected. I mean, like, you can't expect to shoot red raw and get 100 megabits per second or 200 megabits per second. It's just not going to happen. So the file sizes are massive. I saw somewhere like 1500 or 1600 megabits per second if you're shooting red raw 60 frames per second. So they are big files, which mean bigger cards. And not only just bigger cards, but also storage for those files. Again, these are little minuscule problems that even if you got this camera, you threw on a cage and you started adding all these accessories, it's going to end up still being cheaper than the FX3. So I still think, you know, little things like that are not really that big of an issue, again, to me. And then lastly, it doesn't shoot open gate. Now, I'm kind of indifferent with open gate. If I have it, great, I'll use it. If I don't have it, then I'll just make do with what I have. One of the things that I'm most excited about with this Nikon camera is being able to use my Sony lenses on this Nikon Z mount camera. I was talking to my friend Lee Zavitz, and he was saying that the flange distance for Sony lenses and Nikon lenses are so similar. They're not exactly the same, but they're so similar that you can actually get an autofocus adapter, and it's like this thin. I have mine coming in, and you can throw it on the Nikon Z mount, add a Sony lens, and you get your Sony lens basically works flawlessly on Nikon with autofocus. And so if that's the case and everything actually works that good, this just makes it an even greater reason to get this Nikon, because it means I don't have to repurchase lenses or buy the same lenses that I'm currently using with my Sony. I can just grab these lenses, throw them on the Nikon, and use them in exchange with each other. And this camera is so small that I can literally just keep this tucked in my camera bag. Anyways, with that being said, I really only made this video to tell you guys how excited I am about this camera, and also just to let you guys know that I have it and I am going to be testing out in the next couple weeks. So if you guys have any questions about it, or you want to know anything, or you want me to test out anything, just let me know down in the comments and I'll answer them in the full review. Make sure to leave a like, make sure to subscribe to see that video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.